My guest today is Professor Lawrence Lessig. He is a professor of law and leadership at the Harvard Law School. And I'm going to ask him what he thinks the future of expertise might look like in a world after COVID.
What COVID has demonstrated is that even with a crisis that has, in the United States, killed more people than every war except one, we can't get beyond our own partisan way of looking at the world. And that has disabled our capacity to address this problem in a sensible way. It's embarrassing how terribly America has addressed this problem compared to nations like Germany or France or even Britain. And I think this is a problem much bigger. This virus is much bigger than the particular problem of COVID.
Is it this moment of pandemic that has made us so divisive on the issue of expertise, or were we already so?
Well, I think that in the United States, at least, I can only speak from that perspective. We've grown more skeptical of expertise, largely because we've seen much of this expertise being driven actually by commercial interests. So people pretend to be experts in a certain field when actually what they're doing is basically puppets for corporate interest or other types of special interest. So there's this deep growing sense of skepticism. But more fundamentally, we've not yet learned how to govern ourselves in a world where the media is deeply divided, polarizing, creating tribal identities. And we have no capacity to engage or even understand what the other side believes. The United States, like many nations around the world, went through this period of what Marcus Pryor has called broadcast democracy, where we all basically watched the same show at the same time. And we could do this kind of massively transparent democratic engagement when we all were in some sense informed by the same set of materials. But in this world where the business model of cable television or the business model of internet platforms is to divide us, to turn us into these tribal, polarized publics, we've not yet learned how we get beyond that or above that to begin to think about even threats as profound as the threat of a global pandemic.
What is the role of expertise in a democracy? What should it be?
Well, one of the problems is that expertise is complicated. These issues are complicated. And I don't think that they're so complicated that people can't understand them, but I do think that they are more complicated than can be understood in a tweet or in a Facebook newsfeed. And so part of the problem here is that we shift discourse into environments which are just not suitable to produce understanding in those environments. And instead, we ought to be thinking about how we bring people into contexts where they have an opportunity for a more balanced, complete, informed, deliberative understanding about the particular issues. And in that context, I think humans do quite well. I think we can understand complicated matters and deliberate about them and actually and produce political results on the basis of it. The problem is, we expect that in these tweet length or Facebook platforms, people can develop the understanding of this complexity. And so experts are essential, but they're almost useless in the current platform for communicating ideas about these important matters.
What would you like to see in terms of this relationship between expertise and democracy?
There are places like Iceland, for example, where from the very beginning, New Zealand was very similar. The leaders of those countries basically said, okay, this is a matter for science, and we're going to step back and take our direction from the scientists. And both of those countries were very effective in staunching the spread of the virus and bringing the pandemic under control and allowing each nation to transition back to normalcy very quickly. And so in those nations, I know the data in Iceland, I haven't seen similar polls in New Zealand, but in Iceland, confidence in the government and in experts went up dramatically. So that I imagine the next crisis like that hits Iceland, they'll be very well positioned to rely on the expertise of experts because people in some sense have come to see that it pays, that it makes sense. In the United States, it's not going to be so easy because we don't even have a comprehensive or consistent understanding of what's happened or who's responsible for what's happened. And in a world where we have no ability to rise above the partisan spin on every fact, most people just retreat into their tribal corner and remain deeply, deeply skeptical of people from the other side.